The heart of our missions is that God will be glorified and the others will know the grace of God who has called us. Learn how God is using the lives of people like you and like me to expand His kingdom. This is Between Brothers.
Lord, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity again to hear how you have been at work in my brother and Dr. Manny. And I pray that you would bless this conversation, that you would lead and guide it, and that it would honor and glorify you, but it would also be a blessing to others. And I thank you for just a few minutes to pause and reflect and to share how you are good. And I pray this in Christ's name, amen. All right. Okay, so I have known you and will always know you as Dr. Manny, Doctor of the Tongue. What is your full name?
It's Manuel Joseph Gutierrez.
Manuel Joseph Gutierrez. All right. Okay, and we've already mentioned this is going to be a challenge. What parts of the story do we talk about? I know some
parts. Maybe let's take 5 minutes or so. What was growing up for you like? I think you had a big family, right? And then that leading into there's a really beautiful story of how did God come to your family and to you?
It's when I look back on it, I think it's an absolute miracle that I'm here, that I'm involved in Christian service, just every aspect of my life. I think the Lord's the one that changed everything around. My parents are from Mexico. My mother was from the state of Jalisco. Okay. They say that the most beautiful women in Mexico come from. And my mother was a very beautiful woman, very special. She had 15 children. 12 of us lived to adulthood.
Mm.
And
where were you in that number?
I'm number one.
The oldest?
I'm the oldest.
Wow. Okay.
My brothers and sisters, we tease a lot with each other. And we say, oh, you're the old man, the older, or the senior member. And they throw out, I said, no, you got it all wrong. I'm the numero uno. So I always throw that out. But we grew up in a very religious home. My mother's dream was that I would be the priest in the family.
Wow.
So as far as back as I can remember, that was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And catechism, early mass, that was all part of my life.
Wow. Okay.
My folks were migrant workers, and so we traveled throughout the valley, through West Texas, Arizona, up into Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, all of those.
Did you ever go up to Iowa?
No, we never. We had there was a certain farmer that wanted us there. My folks had built a relationship with him. My dad was also very good with the tractor.
Okay.
He had a very steady hand, and that farmer wanted my dad there.
And you would go with where the harvest was, wherever the work for agricultural work was. It
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. My mother worked up until picking cotton up until the day before I was born, and I was born January 1st.
Wow.
So that was in West Texas.
Okay.
And they picked cotton in the latter part of the year.
Okay.
And in Nebraska, there was a small, very tiny little Catholic church. And that's where I started going to catechism. The nuns trained me. I started taking classes, some training so that I could be an altar boy, help a priest. And as I was into it, my dad had to move.
Okay. From Nebraska.
From Nebraska right over into Wyoming.
Okay.
But that meant I could no longer take classes.
Okay.
They didn't have time to be busing me back and forth. So I had to stop.
Okay.
Then we moved again to another small town in Wyoming. We went from the town of Huntley to the town of Yoder to the town of LaGrange.
Okay.
And in LaGrange, there was a small Bible church. One of the fellows that I went to school with kept inviting me to go to church. And of course, that was taboo. That was one of the mortal sins that you don't commit.
And how old are you at this point?
I was in 4th grade.
Okay.
So I was 9, 10. So and I started going to church. It took 2 years of going to church because my guard was so strong. I was so dedicated to the church that I would not allow my heart to think of anything else.
Okay.
But and this is where Rio Grande comes in.
Okay.
Because at that time, the pastor moved out and a new pastor came in. This new pastor had a heart for Mexico.
Oh, we in Wyoming still?
We're still in Wyoming,
okay.
Range, Wyoming.
So you're not growing up in the valley. You're growing up in different places around the state.
Exactly.
Okay.
And during that time, this pastor came, but he had studied at a school that taught Spanish in southern Texas. It was the Rio Grande Bible Institute, and he was in the first class of the missionary language school.
Wow. Okay, so we're in the 50s.
We're in the 50s.
Okay.
This was it started in 1956, and this was about 1958, 59.
So he learned Spanish, but wasn't in South America.
He went down to Mexico for the summer.
Okay.
Contracted hepatitis.
Wow. Okay. So the Lord brought him back.
And because he got sick, they said you should never go back to Mexico again. And he went down single, and then he was engaged to someone in Bible school, came here, went to Mexico, got sick, married, and then went up to LaGrange, Wyoming, where we lived.
Okay.
He didn't want to lose his Spanish, so he spoke to my parents. Would you allow me to come over and practice Spanish with you?
Now, your parents are speaking pretty much only Spanish? Yeah. Okay. So you grew up speaking Spanish at home. Okay.
Yes.
And so he asked, can I come and visit the house and practice Spanish?
Exactly.
Wow.
And that was very unique because my parents were not, my dad actually was my stepdad. He went to 6th grade. My mother went to 2nd grade. So here was someone prominent from the community coming and asking them to teach him.
Wow.
So it unusual dynamics.
How did the pastor know about the family? Like, where did he interact with them to be able to ask? Because I feel like I'm just thinking back in Missouri and in Midwest, those Hispanic communities are sometimes not, you kind of have to go looking for them if you're going to find them sometimes. I don't know. So I'm just curious.
We lived a block from the church, a block from the pastor.
Okay.
The community had only about 200 people in the whole town.
Okay.
So everybody knew everybody, and we were the only Latin family in the area.
Okay.
Spanish speaking. So we we stood out. And he immediately made contact with us. He'd been pastoring for about a year when my mother was expecting. And this time, the baby came early at home, but the baby was stillborn. The ladies from the church came over, delivered the baby at home. Because the baby was stillborn, the church jumped in right away. The pastor said, we'll have a funeral tomorrow morning. The men from the church made a small coffin. The church bought a plot in the cemetery. The next day we had a private funeral service. And my stepdad was there. My mom was still at home. She couldn't get up. The ladies of the church said, we will wash your clothes, clean the house, cook your meals, do your laundry for a week. For a week, you will stay in bed and you won't get up. And the men then helped out with other chores, but basically they took care of the funeral arrangements for my baby brother. That allowed us to suddenly have a closer bond with the church. My stepdad said, where's the priest? He always comes around with the envelopes for the offering. Where is he now? And that was the last time he ever went back to a Catholic church.
Wow.
It was kind of just, my mother was not like that. My mother's dedication and faithfulness. And she passed that on to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it took us a while. It took us about 2 years of going faithfully to church, hearing the gospel, hearing the stories, before I would allow the gospel to come into my heart. But when Christ came into my heart, it was through this pastor that...
What's his name?
Roscoe Schultz.
Roscoe Schultz. All right.
He pastored in our area. Most of his life was in Greeley, Colorado, where he did a lot of church planting and he pastored there. He's retired now, but even in his retirement, he continued to minister in a small church. But the church sponsored us to go to camp away from my family. Then I felt freer to just surrender my heart to Christ. But when I did, the change was immediate, very pronounced. It was very evident in my family. 2 years, that was at age 14. 2 years later, at age 16, I was baptized and accepted as a member of our Bible church.
In Wyoming.
In Wyoming, LaGrange, Wyoming. LaGrange, it was LaGrange Community Church. It's LaGrange Bible Church.
Wow.
And at that time, when I was baptized, my mother was just beside herself.
Like not happy.
Very, very upset.
So even though she was going to the church, she was a service, or no?
She wasn't.
Okay.
We were allowed to as
kids.
Yeah.
But she was still in her Catholic.
She couldn't go to the Catholic church either because it was 15 miles away, and getting there and getting everyone there wasn't possible.
Okay.
But there were 4 younger siblings that were born during that time that were not baptized. So my mother got in touch with a priest and asked him about baptizing. He said, "You haven't been back to Mass for a long time. I won't baptize them unless you promise to bring your whole family back to the Catholic Church."
Wow.
So this put me and my mom at odds.
Because she needed to get everyone back to the Catholic Mass.
According to the priest. That's the only way he'd baptize the 4 youngest ones.
Right.
And I was no longer a part of the Catholic Church, and I let it be known. So my mother called, that Sunday morning, called our pastor, Rocky, and said, I want you to know, Pastor, that if Manny doesn't go to church with me this Sunday, he's never going back to your church again. And he's very wise, and he said to me, and we had been having personal Bible study together. He'd been mentoring me and helping me Monday evenings at 6 o'clock. We had an ongoing time where we read Scripture, we memorized Scripture, and he helped me in my
So there's
Christian
a regular
walk.
discipleship going on there.
Exactly.
Wow.
And he said to my mom, can I speak to Manny? So she gave me the phone, and he said, Manny, I'm so sorry for your situation. The verses that we've been memorizing, do you remember what Philippians 6:1 says? And I said, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. He said, what do you have to do? I said, I have to go to the Catholic Church today. He said, yes, because that's obeying your parents. But remember, God is there too. You have God in your heart. He's going to be with you. And we as a church will be praying for you.
Wow.
He said, so go and see what God's going to do. So I said goodbye, and we hung up, and my mom said, well, I said, I'm going. And then she was really upset, because she said, oh, you'll obey some stranger, but you won't obey your own mother. So I let it go. And we all went to the Catholic Church. I remembered in catechism that if you're not Catholic, you don't participate in the standing, sitting, kneeling. So I sat there. And some of my younger siblings also noticed, and they had been going to church with me, so they sat too.
Oh.
Which was really an embarrassment for my mother, because people knew her. And they knew our family from years before in that church. And it was like, what's going on with the kids? Then after the service, the priest baptized my younger siblings, and my mother said, would you speak to Manny? And the priest came up to me and he said, I understand that you want to leave the Catholic Church. I said, yes. He said, can I ask you why? I said, yes. I said, it's because when I was in this church, I asked the nuns one day, how can I know that I'm going to heaven one day? And they said, you have to go to 5 special masses. I said, I was on the 3rd special mass at 6 o'clock in the morning, fighting the north wind, hiding behind a little tree, and I prayed, Lord, help me not to die until I fulfill the other masses. I said, and you know what? The Bible doesn't tell me anything about going to Mass. It doesn't tell me anything about fulfilling those 5 masses to go to heaven. There's nothing like that in there. And he didn't like that. And he said, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I didn't think about it. It just came out. And I said, the Bible tells us that God created the fowls of the air, so the chicken came before the egg. He looked at me, and then he turned to my mother and he said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Gutierrez. Your son is a lost cause. There's nothing I can do for him.
Oh, wow.
And in a way, his words freed me up. Because if the priest couldn't do anything with me, that meant that my mom couldn't do anything with me spiritually either.
Hey, this story is for you and also for others, so share with your friends. My name is Jennifer Rodriguez, I'm from El Salvador, and this is Between Brothers.
So she released me to go back to church, but what happened was that she became curious. And of course she had a love for our pastor because of the way the church had helped us out. So her heart was always open to him. And he asked her if it would be possible to have a study in our home. She thought, it's the Bible. We're not going to church, at least she wasn't. So he would have a study every Thursday at 6 o'clock in our home. And it so happened that after 2 years, my mother accepted the Lord. But I was real dubious. I thought, oh, she's so dedicated to her church. I really don't know. And she was a strong worshiper of the Virgin Mary.
Wow. And you're what, like 18 by this time?
I'm 16, 17. I'm about 17. Yeah, junior in high school, getting ready to. Yeah, junior in high school. That's when it was. And one day, one of my mother's friends was over. There was another family. There were migrant workers from Mission here. And they'd go up and visit. She and my mom became good friends. And he and my stepdad became good friends. And they had 9 kids. We, at that time, I think, had about 10 kids.
Okay.
And it was just a mob. We played and climbed trees and ran and just had the best of times. But I heard my mother say to her, she said, "Pero Marta, you have to understand that it was Christ that died on the cross for our sins. The Virgin didn't die on the cross for our sins. He paid the penalty. She didn't.
Wow.
So we trust Christ." I thought, oh, she knows. She's got it. She understands. So it was really thrilling. From that point on, my mother was rock solid until the day she died. A year before she passed away, she gathered all of us. She was in the hospital. And she took time with each one of us individually, encouraging us to follow after Christ, to care for each other, pray for each other. And it was something that I don't think my siblings, we will not forget.
That time.
Our mother's admonition to us of continuing to follow after Christ. I know some of my siblings haven't done that, but they have not forgotten what she told them.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, that is a beautiful story of Christ's love being active through the pastor, through the church, and shining light into a family that was rock solid Catholic. So I think at this point we can safely say we're not going to get the whole story in one podcast episode.
I don't think so.
But what happened next? Okay, so you mentioned being a missionary in the Dominican Republic. At some point you come back to the Valley because you're here now, and also you were here when you were teaching me. So I guess what's the next step transitioning out of your teenage years into like you were being discipled by the pastor, you were growing in your faith, the Lord saved your mom. I don't know if you want with your dad what happened, but specifically what was the next steps in your life?
Actually, when I graduated from high school, I was going to go to a Grace Bible Institute in Omaha, Nebraska. I had been accepted. That's where Roscoe Schultz had gone.
Okay.
And I found out after coming here that Ike Friesen and Aaron Jewett had gone to school with Roscoe Schultz, and they knew each other.
Wow.
And Roscoe had come down here when Ike Friesen had also come. So they also were in language school, the first language school together.
Wow.
So there was a connection there. But I had been accepted at Grace, and the summer before I was supposed to go, a team from Grand Rapids School of the Bible and Music in Grand Rapids, Michigan came through. It was a quartet, but I saw in them a life, a spark, an energy that I hadn't really seen in other young people. And I asked them about the school where they were studying and everything, and they gave me an application. I filled the application out. I sent the application in, withdrew my application from Grace. And why I did it like that, I don't know. But the same day that I received my acceptance from Grand Rapids School of the Bible and Music, I also received my my refund from Grace.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I had been accepted out in Michigan.
Okay.
And as it turned out, the pastor that took over after Roscoe Schultz left was from Grand Rapids
From
School.
that school. Okay. All right.
So there was
There are still connections.
still connections there.
So you went and studied the Bible at Bible College. Was it 4 years?
It was a 3-year program.
3-year program.
And during the summers, we were involved in ministry.
Okay.
It was a practical ministry. So I worked at camps and I worked at Bible conferences in Michigan, and I was accepted as a youth pastor at one of the churches. My last year at Grand Rapids, I felt like I wanted to go into either youth ministry or the pastorate. But that summer before I went back, there was a missionary speaking. And this missionary was with HCJB.
HCJB.
Which is Regions Beyond
Okay.
in Ecuador.
Okay.
And that week, I was working at the Bible conference, and I was on a dish crew. And that week we had huge crowds, tons of dishes, pots and pans. So after everyone had eaten and then gone to the tabernacle for the service, I got done with the dishes, and it was muggy. It was hot because the conference is on the edge of Gull Lake.
Okay.
And it's a Gull Lake Bible Conference. And I was exhausted. So I went into an annex to the dining hall that we call the Sugar Shack.
Okay.
And I just laid on the floor. It was cooler there. But there was a speaker from the tabernacle that I could turn on.
Okay.
And I listened to the message.
That's nice.
And the missionary was saying, to this day I don't know who it was.
Wow.
But he was saying, many times God calls and we put excuses up. Lord, I'm not qualified. Lord, I don't have those abilities. Lord, you, and we just have put up a wall and said no to the Lord, but not realizing we've said no that direct. And he said, we're willing to do other things, but when it comes to being a missionary, going elsewhere, going out of our comfort zone, we just say, Lord, not that. And I had been doing that. And I lay there, and I remember tears. What is it? That old song, I've got tears in my ears while I lie on my back crying over you, something like that. And that's the way I felt. I had ears full of tears because I was repenting. And I said, Lord, I'm so sorry. I've been telling you no all along and trying to go another route, and you've been guiding and continue to guide me. So that night I said, if you want me to concentrate on mission studies this last year, I will. So that's what I did.
Okay. So you studied your last year of Bible college. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I took the missions courses that I felt I should, and finished up in May. And then the Lord, through a friendship that I had developed that last year at the Bible conference, there was a friend of mine that was going to Moody Bible Institute. And I went one more year to Moody Bible Institute.
Okay.
And took missions classes there. And I got to teach from Harold Cook. We'd say Harold Cook, the man that wrote the book.
Okay.
Because he wrote one of the first missions books. And I took classes from him, which to me was a thrill.
Yeah.
I was very, very honored and pleased. And I came back to the Gull Lake area. I plugged into the Gull Lake Bible Church as a youth pastor. And that summer I went to, at that time it was known as Unevangelized Fields Mission. It's known as Crossroads today.
Okay.
And I went to Bala Cynwyd for the candidate school that summer, was accepted as a missionary, and I was going to Brazil.
Okay.
And I thought, I will learn Portuguese. It's close enough to Spanish. And I heard the missionaries that presented the work in Portugal and enjoyed it. But there was one missionary that presented the work of the Dominican Republic. And he spoke half an hour maybe. He showed pictures, but the pictures and the need that he presented, it was just like, this is where you're going. This is where I want you. And that half hour, my heart melted. I thought, Manny, you've got the language. Why do you learn Portuguese? You know the customs. You know the Catholic traditions. You can understand. You don't understand that I've been preparing you for this all along. It was like, wow. So I switched.
Okay.
And I asked to be transferred to the Dominican field. I was accepted for it. And the mission board actually felt like that was where I should have been applying in the first place.
Okay.
So I went and I served there 2 years. In the meantime, though, there was someone that came into my life.
Okay.
And before I left for the Dominican, I became engaged.
Okay. Before you left for the 2 years?
Before I left for the 2 years.
Okay.
It was really for 4 years, but I was going to be gone 2 years. I'd come back and get married, and then we'd go for another 2 years.
Okay. Okay. Who is the special person?
And this special person was somebody that I'm not married to now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I came back, and she had been studying here at the Rio Grande Bible Institute, language.
Okay.
So I came here for the first time to the Rio Grande Bible Institute, and I saw my fiance, but something had really changed. She had fallen for a missionary that was studying here.
Wow.
All the students
During
knew
those
it.
2 years.
During that year that she was in language school.
Okay, during the 1 year of language school. Okay.
And when I came, she said, I told you that I would wait for you, so I've waited, but I want you to know that things are different, and
Wow.
I did my part. I waited, but I want you to know that my feelings have changed.
Wow.
So I left on my way back to the Dominican Republic, and I stopped in Michigan at the church. One of the fellows that had been in my youth group came with his girlfriend, and he brought the head of the kitchen crew for the conference there, because the Bible church was in one spot, the conference was just down the road, and so there was a relationship between them. And I was speaking that evening, so he came with his girlfriend, and he brought this gal that was interested in missions and had questions. So afterwards, he invited me to go with them back to the sugar shack. And we got together, and this young lady, in my heart, I had been hurt so deeply, I thought, no women for a long, long time. I don't want to worry about that. It's just messy.
Yeah.
But I saw this young lady, and she was beautiful, outside and inside. Had lots of questions, obviously a love for the Lord. And when we got to the sugar shack, the director, it was her director, had been my director when I worked there, saw us together. And his wife saw us together there. So the wife takes Jane aside and says, Jane, Manny is really a nice fellow. You really should get to know him. Howard, the husband that never messed with it. His wife was a matchmaker. He was not messing with that. He came to me and he said, Manny, Jane is really a sweetie. You really should get to know her. And he asked me to come back and help them out in the dining hall during the week that I was there. So we got to know each other better. We began corresponding, and we corresponded from late July until the end of October. And I had had my devotions, had prayed, gone to bed, and I got out of bed and I wrote her a letter, because I knew that I was beginning to have feelings for her, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I don't want to be hurt again. I want to be upfront. If she's open to it, fine. If she's not, then it's done and over with. At that time, our letters were going back and forth, and we had 2 sets of letters going on at the same time, because it took 9 days to get a letter back to each other. I'd send her the letter, and 4 to 5 days after I sent my letter, I received a letter that was almost identical to the one that I had sent her.
Wow.
So we realized that the Lord was working in our hearts. That Christmas, she came and visited me in the Dominican.
Okay.
She waited the next Christmas and came to visit me. But that first Christmas, we became engaged. I wrote a letter to her father. Mind you, she had 4 brothers and she was the only daughter. And her father sent me a letter saying, I would love to have you as my son-in-law, not knowing me. But I had help, because the night that I helped out at the Bible conference, her aunt had been there at the conference and met me. So when her parents found out that she was writing this missionary, the aunt said, I know him. I met him. And so she's the one that put in a good word for me. So all those little details, I think the Lord had his hand in it.
So in total, you served 2 years in the Dominican, the first year?
First 2 years.
First 2 years?
And then the second 2 years while I was corresponding with Jane.
Okay, okay. So 4 years.
So I had 4 years in the Dominican Republic.
And then you came back and got married?
Yes. During the time that I was in the Dominican, I worked as a church planter, and there was a small Bible institute, and I taught at the Bible.
Taught the Bible.
I taught the Bible there. And when I came back from the Dominican in '75, Jane and I, of the 2 years that we had known each other, had only spent a total of about 2 weeks together.
Right, yeah. Two Christmases.
Yes.
And then a few more days, okay.
Yes. So we didn't know each other. But she had been accepted from the same mission board.
Okay.
We came...
which is now Crossroads, or what was it?
Crossroads.
Crossroads, okay.
We came back to Rio Grande for her language studies.
Because she needed to learn Spanish still.
Yes,
okay.
and I helped her.
Okay.
And several other missionaries. So while they were learning, I was teaching them. I had an outside job, and I'd work outside and come in the evenings and help teach the other missionaries, getting them ready for their tests and so forth.
Okay.
We had to do, as missionaries, we had to do gratis work for the school.
Okay.
So I worked right here where this radio building is. There were motel apartments.
Right.
And our...
El Contento, right?
El Contento. And we lived in apartment 4. And we had some other friends that were in apartment 6. And so we'd all get together. We'd have study time together. And I worked this entire area, keeping the grounds mowed and trimmed. And that was part of my work.
While Jane is learning Spanish.
Yes.
Because you weren't studying here at that point, or were you?
No, I did take a couple of classes to learn. I took grammar because my training had always been in English.
Okay.
And
so you took Spanish grammar.
I took Spanish grammar.
Oh, okay, okay.
But I was learning the whys. Why do we do what we do? And that was a huge help to me. But that was all part of the preparation for down the road.
For what you didn't know was coming.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the first part of April, we had about a month before Jane would be graduating.
At this point, the plan is going back to the Dominican Republic?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And Jane had developed a very good relationship with one of the gals that was going to be staying on staff. She was going to be the receptionist for the school. And I think a secretary to the president at that time. And she kept on us. You need to consider this as a ministry. I was death on it. Absolutely not. No way. When you've lived in the Caribbean,
Michigan, the Caribbean, the Valley would not be an option. I mean, humanly speaking.
We had coconut palm trees, not these little palm trees. The water, the Caribbean water is crystal clear. You can look right through, and you could go snorkeling and see tropical fish everywhere. And I've
the
never.
Valley is not.
That's not
the
this Padre Island. May be nice, but it is not the Caribbean.
Okay.
So I wanted to go back. It was during that time that the Lord began speaking to my heart, and the Lord then spoke to my wife as well about about staying.
This podcast is a part of Rio Grande Bible Ministries. If you want to learn more about the Bible College, that's in Spanish, the language school to learn Spanish, the radio station, or Bibleville, or any of the other ministries of Rio Grande, find us at riogrande.edu. That's our website, riogrande.edu. And if you want to interact with the podcast, if you want to ask questions, give us feedback, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, searching for Entre Hermanos. Make sure to add Rio Grande to your search, and we will be the first ones to show up. Thank you for listening to our podcast, Entre Hermanos, which means Between Brothers.